Thank you, Dave. Bill online. Or Bill Quinn.
Yeah.
Hi, Bill. We're just waiting.
How are you?
Good. We're waiting for Bill Lamar. We'll get started any moment here.
But Lamar's, you're actually
You do? All right, and let me get started with housekeeping. Welcome, everybody. Good to see everyone in person and on screen. So let me just go through housekeeping remarks. So good morning and thank you for participating in our hybrid meeting for the South Coast AQMD Permit Streamlining Task Force Subcommittee. We have three formats for participation: in person, the Zoom app, and teleconference. Please silence your communication devices to prevent disruptions during the meeting. In-person attendees must not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the meeting room. All participants on Zoom, except for subcommittee members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. You will not be able to mute or unmute your line manually. After each agenda item, public comment will be taken. For those of in the room. Oh, we have one now. Carol, please line up at the podium and you will be called for your turn to speak. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the raise hand button. For those calling in by phone, you can dial *9 to signal that you would like to comment. Your name or part of your phone number will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes for all agenda items on the agenda and 3 minutes or less for public comment. Meeting chair may provide a shorter length of time, depending on the number of requests to speak received, to allow everyone an opportunity to be heard. The countdown timer will be displayed on screen for public comment if that is needed. Please note, you can hang up and leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. Lastly, be aware that this video conference is being recorded. By participating in this meeting hosted by South Coast AQMD, you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during this live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD. That concludes our standard housekeeping remarks. I did want to add a couple for attendees in the room. Our mics are very sensitive, so just please be mindful of speaking at the table or shuffling of papers. It gets picked up very easily, as some of you may have heard from past committee meetings if you're online. So just to be conscious of our remote attendees. And then facilities, if you need them during the meeting, are located outside the door to the right and the right. So we can bring the meeting to order. If you want to do a roll call for our task force.
Good morning. Bill Lamar.
Bill Lamar here.
William Pierce.
Here.
Bill Quinn.
Here.
David Rothbard.
Here.
Judy York. Here. Thank you. Back to you, Chelsea.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everybody. Again, we're back in this hybrid format, well, in-person part of it. So it's good to see everybody. Really helps with participation. And then thank you for the task force members participating remotely. I think we'll jump in. We'll keep things moving along. I think this meeting today is going to be discussion. I think we'll jump right into item 2. We've had lots of discussion in the past. I think it's using this mechanism, this task force to talk about other things. I think we've used it more recently in presenting data, which there'll still be a need for. But I think this meeting, particularly, we're going to jump into a lot of the permitting process, what we deal with, how we develop it and implement it. Have a very robust discussion, and it will continue to be a component in task force meetings. I want to thank, we reached out to task force members to provide agenda items for this meeting. And we'll probably do that before every meeting from here on out. I don't think it was ever the intent to get away from that, but we're back at it. So just kind of for those that, just for everyone's awareness, task force members' awareness is we did have a number of agenda items provided. So we will be trying to spread them out a bit. Some of them include other divisions, but just as introduction, so everyone knows what type of topics we're looking at. I tried to summarize them in to the best of my ability, but most of the proposals, some of which we're going to be discussing today, revolve around permit conditions, development, purpose of them, consistency. I think that's on for our later agenda item. Source testing, we can probably jump into a bit of that, and that involves another division. We'll need to invite and talk about those topics. I think emission factors, how they're developed and used. That also could involve our AER team as well. The backed process, research permits, the potential to include planning in that, since there is a rule for research permit. Is there some enforcement discretion topics, which would obviously include compliance and enforcement and possibly legal. Request to talk about the XBP program. I think leading up to that, we'll probably pull some data together to help the discussion move along. Policies, which is also part of PEP, and then also CEQA process. And then today, I think we're getting into our consultants' permit conditions and the CPP program. So just as we do this, we're trying to take it in manageable chunks so we can have a robust discussion. We are going to be committing to more task force meetings, and then also something we would like to discuss with the task force is introducing the concept of a permitting working group, where we may be able to hone in more on industry related items or other maybe in-depth permitting items outside of this task force. Obviously, task force members would still be involved, but it would not necessarily be a Brown Act committee, and we could be more flexible with how those discussions go. But we will still have an increased number of task force meetings that we can have these high-level discussions, regarding policies and how they're just developed. But we'll jump into discussion on that concept, but we're thinking it would follow kind of like our rule-making working groups. Obviously we'll need some help with outreach to various industries, which we're trying to develop through our sign-up list. But scheduling-wise, just so task force members have a good idea of what to expect within the next year, I think we will probably look at launching this working group meeting, probably initially with a waste management focus around June. And then from there, for fiscal year, probably jumping right into July with a task force meeting. And then maybe September, October, December, having a task force meeting, a couple more working groups. We'll have to assess how the working group works. Again, we want feedback on this today. And then we'll probably take a break January, February, simply because the team that coordinates this meeting has a lot of obligations for board items with Reclaim Rule 1315 around that time. So we'll probably take a break early in 2025. We were talking about 2025. But so we'll go dark, but then reinitiate it in March and then maybe May and June. But we'll be in contact with the task force members and we'll be able to relay the schedule a little bit better. But that's kind of the initial thinking for this. And then, like I said, as far, we'll keep working through the proposed agenda items as can be manageable in single meetings and coordinate with other teams that need to be here and make our way through them. And this is going to be just an ongoing discussion for these today, and hoping we can get through all our topics today. But I think I wanted to take this agenda items just to kind of go through those concepts. And why don't we open it up to the task force for discussion?
I'll start off. Just want to thank you and staff. Really appreciate this, and especially Chair Delgado to kind of reinvigorate the discussion. And as I told you, Jason, and others, kind of go back to the previous format of this group, where the members will come in with, here are issues that we're seeing, and hopefully it's not an opportunity to complain, but an opportunity to find solutions. So everyone attending, that's kind of what I would encourage everyone to do. If you have a topic, come in with a recommendation on how to make things better, with the focus of, I think the bottom line here is, how do we get permits issued faster, more consistently, so you could get emission reductions, and on the other side of the table, we could get permits more quickly. But again, thank you very much for having the meeting and having a slightly different approach.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think the intent was ever there to get away from it. I think we've, obviously a lot of us have come into this forum, and certain practices were established, and we're continuing those, but we're more than happy to have these discussions, get the feedback from all of you who have a lot of experience. So really appreciate it. Pause. Did any other task force members have thoughts on any of that? Is permitting working group sound like something for more detailed than what we're thinking of, like waste management, is the different industries issues we have there, permit conditions. It doesn't have to be just waste management. Staff's also thinking maybe there may be an opportunity for gas stations.
But this will be open to anyone to attend. I mean,
yes.
I'm probably the more vocal one, but as I say, a lot of the things I'm bringing up applies across the board, not just waste management.
Yeah, I think everybody, and I think we'll need some help with outreach. We're trying to develop some of those tools, and we'll use rulemaking sign-up lists to get the word out. But that's the thinking. Judy, go ahead.
I think we do. I think we want to strive for more consistency and better communication. I think that's my theme today. and I have some examples and solutions, but having separate segmented groups would not help that. So I would encourage the larger group to continue really talking, to really refine better processes, communication, and really getting everyone both internally to the air district and externally on the same page, really, even with the most basic, requirements, and what's needed for a complete application, for standardized processes, conditions, policies, all of that. We need more common ground.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's kind of what we were seeking as feedback, is there is going to be this line of what's suitable, what should be discussed here in this committee, getting that, and then what can go to this working group format. But thank you I think we'll probably announce everything, and then maybe we'll just broadcast the agenda items of what we would like to focus. And again, we're open for agenda items in either form. So let me pause. I think Bill Quinn has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. So, this is kind of an interesting question because in the past meetings, you've spent so much time talking about staffing and all, and I know we wanted to go looking into solutions, but I actually have a staffing question. So I'm also, several of us in this committee are on the Budget Advisory Committee, and we've been watching that process go forward. And what I'm seeing is that for the next 5-year projection, there's really no change in staffing. Is that true for your division as well? Or do you, because there are additional funds coming into this group, do you see additional staffing in your team?
I think that's a discussion we have to have with Susan, Wayne. We're looking at numbers right now. We are growing right now. We have been, I think you all know we've made great strides in staffing and we're growing, but now it's the projection of our work, of what we're going to be capable of. And then also the unpredictable nature of incoming permit applications. We're going to be, at the request of the board, we're going to be having a written report for PEP come to Stationary Source starting this month. It's still in draft form, but our intent there is to give a better picture of what we're dealing with, not just inventory, but what's coming in, what's going out, the flow diagram. I think, in terms of workloads, what we're seeing, more complex rules. This isn't what it was 20 years ago. I was looking at some of the old numbers. A permit is, has to go through much more analysis through this process than it did a long time ago. So, it's an ongoing discussion in terms of staffing with us, but for right now, I think we got more resources. We're bringing them up to speed. We got the people in place. Things, you'll hopefully see this in this written report. Things are looking better. Our production's going up, but we're not there yet. And I think that was some of the board's, or what I heard from the board is the understanding it's going to take some time, but let's make sure you're making progress. And so far, it's there. It is looking good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. All right. So we'll keep working on that. I think we're more or less on the same page, but I did want to, I think we'll stop there if there was no more task force members, but did,
I had it.
oh, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. It was behind the water
okay.
bottle.
No, I mean, historically, we tried very hard not to bring individual permit issues up at this meeting. So, I mean, maybe having another type group that can focus on more individual. And when I say individual, not necessarily, they're not just necessarily our issue, but I mean, they spread across the board, but that might be of more use. And also I've mentioned before about the possibility, I mean, membership wise, I think there were historically more active members participating in the task force. And I didn't know if that's something that could be looked at or any possibilities there. But I think when this started ages ago, but now it seems, but yeah, there were more members, and so that were actively participating.
Yeah, I think there does need to be increased membership. It has dwindled down, so I think that's a discussion we'll have internally. And I believe at the outset of this, the membership was approved or brought to the board. So I think we should probably revisit that and recommend it. So I think we'll probably go out and seek that out. And then also, I did want to add a couple items of one for everyone, attendees, task force members alike. If there are individual items, please reach out to us. I think we need to hear these as they're going on, and we're able to resolve a lot of those issues, especially as we're growing and building. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us, so we can address items that maybe we may not be aware of. The other thing, I think, as we went through the pandemic, turnover of staff and then workloads moved around as we kind of triaged everything. A lot of things did come to our attention as far as consistency that we're working through. So we're aware of it. We're working on it. We see the need for it. And I think it's getting the attention it needs and the resources it needs. So there's some things, I think we have some agenda items on here that we'll be talking about. But it's things we're definitely looking at and want the input on. Okay. All right. Let me pause there. I'm going to open it up for public comment on this item. I do see some hands raised. So first one in line is, forgive me on pronunciation, Alok. Please go ahead. You should be unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So good morning. I'm just curious to know that whether do you have a summary of all the permit application that are year old or more than year old, and what you are planning to address those permits application that have been filed with you and the facility didn't receive any permit and some facility may be working under permit, those things.
Yeah, thank you for that. Typically, this meeting is going to be a little bit different. We do present a lot of data, sometimes almost to a fault in the past, just for transparency purposes. We will be doing that again in our probably our next permit streamlining. I'm anticipating that may be July timeframe, where we will present some of that data. But yeah, we do present all of that forward facing. And then as far as, taking action, that is what we look at. And then also, as I mentioned, in our stationary source committee, there is going to be a written report attached with that, which it's going to be more of a very concise summary that will tell inventory and key activities. But that's another resource you can use in the meantime. But this is something we're looking at. And it's not just that it's a year old, but if it's a year old and we haven't taken action on it, because some of those are simply applications that are in our inventory and I've already received a permit to construct, so they have to remain open. Or other items. That's all discussed in detail, or proposed to be discussed in detail in the written report. So this is an ongoing discussion, and I think for today it's more of a process discussion, but that data is normally presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up in our queue is Rita Loof. Rita, go ahead when you're unmuted.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Rita Loof, Director of Environmental Affairs for RADTIC International. And just wanted to say I'll gladly volunteer to serve on the Permit Streamline Task Force. So if you can point me to the process by which I apply, I'll gladly do that. I wanted to go back to the comments raised by Bill Pierce. I wholeheartedly agree. But I think it's an issue of process. I think the members are very hardworking. I know Bill Lamar and all the members that have been participating for years have spent a lot of time and energy on this process. But what I see is that the process itself does not lend itself to members being very active. It's more of a passive process. It's not exclusive to this committee. I know those comments have been made to staff in the past, where it's more of a listening session for the staff to present and then the members to listen to the information. So I would encourage the committee to look at the process itself and figure out a way to provide the members more of an opportunity to be active in the process. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Rita. Appreciate that. And we'll we'll note your name, and then we will, I think we have to go back and look at the mechanism and also announce it on a larger scale. But I think we have to go back and look at what the original task force, the makeup of it, and then see what opportunities for various disciplines were allocated and get that moving. Thank you. Next up in our queue is Allison Torres.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for providing the overview of the potential topics for upcoming meetings. My suggestion might go along with your policy topic, but I do have a topic suggestion for you to consider for future meetings that focuses on developing a policy to better separate rulemaking from permitting. I think this task force would be a good forum to discuss what that policy might need to include. But essentially, my suggestion would be to establish a permitting policy with some type of guidelines so that to avoid rulemaking during permitting. Sometimes we've seen the permitting process used as kind of a substitute to or a means to enhance rulemaking, and this leads to detailed operating conditions put in permits that might be beyond what's in the rules and can lead to permitting delays spent developing or researching those topics during permitting and outside of that public rulemaking process. So just a future topic suggestion to develop a stakeholder vetted policy to hopefully reduce these inconsistencies and hopefully reduce permit delays. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Allison. We'll make a note of it. I think we have a whole meeting just to discuss permit conditions and the various topics, but understood, and we'll try and mix that in with that those topics. Thank you. Next in our queue is Kurt Coleman.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again, yeah, thanks, Jason, for setting this up, having the meeting. I just want to address briefly what Bill Pearson had said, which is expanding the group that is participating. Since Bill is one of the members of my organization, I think what you really need is some more representatives of people who actually are handling permits for a broad range of facilities, permitting consultants. And I know Judy is one of those, but I think in the past you'd had at least one other, maybe two others. I'd have to go back and look. But so I'm not going to suggest that I become a member of the group. I don't think you need another trade association representative on there, but I may be suggesting some names of permitting consultants that could add to the committee and get sort of a broader range of issues, or at least broader range of permit application topics than someone like me could provide, or someone in a narrower focus like David and Bill Pierce could provide. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kurt. I think we went through this 2016, 2017 with similarly with BACT SRC, where it did dwindle down over the years and just needed to be reinvigorated, and we've been able to maintain that since then. And I think since the last task force meeting, I think we did receive a resignation letter from Finance Carlton. So they kind of brought a lot of this to the surface. So we need to revisit this, reinvigorate the task force. So please, Kurt, send me those recommendations, we'll reach out, but, we'll gladly take names and volunteers like Rita had, and go ahead.
A resource that you have is to look at your own CPP list and who processes, who submits a lot of apps. That's
Thank you for that.
yeah.
All right, that concludes public comment for this item. We are going to be moving on to item 3. Just some background on the items, since these are recommendations. What we will be doing is looking to the task force member who asked for the ideas to be included, just to introduce their topics for staff discussion. So next up, we have upcoming permitting requirements that Bill Lamar was asking about. And Bill, if you want to take a moment and introduce the topic in a little more detail.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. When you called for comments or questions, I happened to have just completed viewing one of the local CSC meetings, and oftentimes at these meetings, the subject of permits comes up more often than not, I guess. And in some of those meetings, the residents of the community or even the CSC panel members will get into a large discussion about anywhere from some of them don't want a particular facility to be issued a permit. Some of them don't want them renewed or want them taken away, and others would like them modified. And this is all part of the general discussion. So I guess this prompted my question that in addition to the current requirements that the district has for issuing permits to stationary sources, is staff aware of any plans to implement and impose any additional requirements as prerequisites for either issuing or obtaining permits to construct or operate for any reason? And then I put in there also, I'd like to say, not because of a particular CSC meeting, but especially as a result of CARB's recent approval of their Blueprint 2.0. And I don't know how familiar some of you are about that. It's a 164-page document, but it raised some red flags for me to see if the permitting process would be different for facilities in these targeted neighborhoods or areas as they are for the same permits being issued to facilities outside of the boundaries of these targeted communities. And if so, is that going to have are those permit applications treated differently? And does that mean that that's also going to increase the waiting time for those permits and possibly overflow into the entire permit review and issuance process?
Thank you very much for that, Bill. For the items you mentioned, well, one, our permitting process follows our rules, all our board adopted rules. We have very limited, no discretion in going outside of our rules. So anything that would alter that process would need to go through the public rulemaking process and then be approved by the board. In terms of additional requirements from that program, I'm not aware of anything specifically addressing permitting or changing permitting requirements. That doesn't mean there aren't rules being amended or adopted, due to concerns brought forth through the CSC process. But again, that is a public process. It's still the rulemaking process. Then at the end of it, our permitting process would implement whatever gets adopted in that proposed rule. So same concept we've seen in the past, but that's the mechanism we've been doing or following. I have seen in other districts they have taking specific actions on limiting health risk in certain communities. South Coast have adopted that approach. It's more looking at emission reductions through our other rules. So that's the current state of things. That's not to say it's not going to change. I'm not aware of anything at this time. I don't know if staff is either, but that's our process. And then just one more item, engineering and permitting does have some items under 617. I guess obligations to implement, but it's more on education, reaching out to other agencies to make them aware of permits we've issued, and also making applicants aware of cleaner technologies. Those are two things we're working on as part of the 617 process, but nothing to change current permitting practices. And then who's going to go to, I don't know if you had any other questions on that, Bill, and then we have Judy behind you.
Bill, I would suggest that you read up on the rulemaking regarding new source review as we sunset out of reclaim, and take a look at the proposed amendments to Reg 13. Look at those carefully, and then participate in the workshops that are ongoing. And then also the BACT SRC committee every year looks at upcoming and changes to the BACT requirements. So those are two forward-looking and future changes that will significantly impact permitting. And but as Jason says, once the rule is adopted, then we incorporate that into permitting.
Right. Yeah, David.
Sure. And on the premise of kind of new requirements, one thing that comes to my mind that I've heard of the BACT SRC and other groups, and even from CARB, is what is the perception of BACT versus what is really BACT? There's a perception that you can have one type of control, say engine or whatever it may be, and there's a push to say BACT is electrification. And I don't think that's the definition of BACT or the process. So this might be an opportunity to provide clarity to all stakeholders as far as what is the formal process to determine BACT. So even CARB and others are on the same page with us. That might be beneficial when we have rules and everything else. So everyone, hopefully more people understand what BACT really is.
No, yeah, thank you. That's come up even this week as far as class and category of BACT, how to implement it, where zero emission. That discussion is becoming more prevalent. So I think, I mentioned, we have an upcoming BACT item, so I think we can probably work in that discussion now. But those are very good suggestions. Reg 13, is under consideration or going through the amendment process, a long amendment process right now.
Yeah.
To help, with the transition of reclaim. In terms of scheduling of, next BACT SRC meetings, we're in the strategy, planning part right now as far as what our next effort will look like. So there's, internal discussions looking for new BACT determinations or other things we're doing. I mentioned some obligations under 617 for cleaner technologies. The BACT team is working on those efforts as well. There's some things there, but I think, yes, I think in this forum, I think we can talk about where BACT lies in all this and clarifying that requirement.
And I'll say South Coast has really improved the BACT process, the BACT determination process and clarity and public meetings. It follows a very normalized, I'll say, process and communication and working groups. It's great.
Yeah.
Information is flowing to everyone. It's really working nicely.
Thank you. I think it's been part of, and I'll give Bhaskar some kudos there.
Yeah.
Bringing it back in engineering and permitting was a big help because it obviously directly impacts permitting. So getting all those considerations in place of, emission limits, how they're set, how they're tested, methodology, all of that is discussed in detail as we propose these.
And public input is really listened to and incorporated and addressed, and it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good process.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other task force members with their hand raised, let's open. Sorry, I lost my agenda there. We'll open up item number 3 for public comment. Is there any public members that wish to comment on this item? All right, seeing none. We are moving along. I suspect the next couple we'll have a very robust discussion. But I will hand it over to task force member David Rothbart to introduce the next topic.
Thank you, Jason. So the premise of this topic is to find some more consistency in permit conditions, again, to find ways to streamline permitting and hopefully be able to make it such that the way I kind of characterize it is when you go in for a permit, you're kind of haggling over permit conditions and kind of move beyond that. And we all work hard on developing rules and understanding the rules. And it'd be nice to be able to have something that's much more like a boilerplate permit that we know what we're getting into. And that's the concept here. And a number of years ago, Clean Water SoCal worked with staff and coming up with boilerplates, which we hoped would be, to this effect of having something, you have a certain type of device to say, oh, here's a boilerplate, and this is an easy way to get a permit quickly. And it really didn't stick as well as we wanted to. So it's the concept of, is there a way to come up with something to avoid the permit haggling that we say, probably not the best characterization, but it's the term I use, but to have some way of saying, how do we go from the rules to a standardized permit? And obviously it's going to have to be site specific, but there's a lot of things we know already that could go on a permit that both sides will know what we're starting out with. And hopefully if we have something like that, it will cut down the time of processing a permit is a concept here. And then the other element that's on the agenda here is, as far as if we're going to have boilerplates or something move in that direction, would it be something appropriate to assign to a consultant to draft up for South Coast staff? So that's the concept on that. And also the other element of this that kind of dovetails into it, just kind of having consistency is there an opportunity to look at the permitting handbook and have something, again, just something to point to, say, we've thought this out. Here's how to move forward. So there's not as much of the haggling. So that's a concept that I wanted to have discussed.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think, this is probably just the initial conversation. As I said, we're probably going to have about permit conditions. I think I'll start on just the teams in general, how, again, how do permit conditions come about, maybe even in the absence of discussions with SCAP is, I would say, for the most part, and I can maybe look at nods of heads, but templates are gathered by staff and accessed. Not to say there's one particular template, but more of a library of conditions for different projects.
Maybe an example that at least my members go to me is we might have a device at one facility and someone else has essentially the same device, and you see completely different permits. Or even I've seen situations at the same facility. and a different permit engineer with different conditions. So just illustrating, it seems like there's room to be more efficient.
Yeah, and there's various reasons, because I mean, we've seen it too, is are you taking a historical permit and then building on those existing ones and maybe doing building one from scratch with more current conditions. Something that does come up, you mentioned this, but site specific is for new source review considerations. Is there something backed or offset related that needs additional record keeping or monitoring requirements, or maybe additional emission limits? So there's various, mechanisms that they can be caused, but I think that's how staff handles it. Let me pause and let Judy weigh in on that.
We have this same issue as we do things internally. We now have 18 CPPs and probably 25 engineers doing permitting, at various times during the year. We work all over the state of California, so it's not just one air district and then all different kinds of equipment. And so we do the same thing of, okay, where is there an air stripper that we most recently did? Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel each time. So we kind of struggle with the same thing, but as databases become more incorporated into what we're doing, rather than me going to, hey, what'd you do last week? We're now querying our database of jobs and figuring out where that is. So I have a question, and that is, because we've thought about the same things. Can we query the database? Can the air district, can permit engineers query the most recent air strippers permitted, or engines, or RTOs, or can they query those and pull up what are the most recent 10 that were permitted, and can we look at those conditions? And can they do that?
I think you're looking at Reneo, who's in our planning department.
Oh, sorry.
Sat down in our IM section.
I thought, that's what I was looking at. Yeah, I'm like, okay, a new face for me.
I think.
Does anybody know?
Yes.
Can they do that?
I think, yes, I think we do access it through on base. Everything's there. We keep everything for
across groups.
You can play it with the beacon number.
Yeah.
With the what?
Each
Equipment category. Equipment category. They can query through the equipment category. Because if you remember, I'm sure you remember, 100 years ago, there was a.
Thank you.
I know, I know. A long time ago, there was a standardized conditions library. Remember that? And I still have a copy. It's in a notebook, 3-ring binder, about this thick. And it was sort of the conditions library, and then it was sort of abandoned. And I realized there was an effort to, okay, let's write a manual, but that sort of, in my opinion, went on the wrong track, trying to sort of create what it should be, rather than go, what are our best 10 air strippers? Here's the, our standard conditions. And then we have the go-to for that, or a paint booth, or whatever,
Let's say you'll capture everything. Thank you for that. And I think that's, jumping to the consultant part of it is there are handbook chapters that were, as we went through the pandemic, we got to reinitiate. Well, we're, going through that of how to move forward. But what we started doing is we have a consultant working on one now. If I brought this up in this task force, but I think I did for metal cutting is we saw the inconsistencies, but we're utilizing the consultant is, I think that's pretty much what we did is we gave him everything. Here's permits, here's emission factors, here's things from industry we've heard, sort it all out for us and give us something to review. With that in mind is let's all get on the same page because emission factors were here and there. And obviously if you permit in different groups, what David was saying is I get a different, throughput here than if I go through this team, which
right
is obviously, and then the other part of as industry coming into the permitting process, there's hopefully some expectation of what kind of control will I need going into it? What do I build into my, costs for all of this and design and all of that? So that's kind of, we're mindful of that. We're seeing it, but that's, the kickoff of using our consultants. We use them for a lot more. We got them on CEQA projects to support permitting. We got them on modeling projects and other things, but we're really throwing stuff at them. And I think we probably have a gold mine here in terms of put all this together and give us something to review for us, and then coming up with that. I think it's getting back to that, and that's a process and all of that. And then permitting process, there probably always still will be that discussion when we talk about draft conditions. Even if you standardize everything, everyone's going to have their particular asks for their facility.
Every
Yeah.
situation is different.
Yes. We know that. We'll never get away from it.
We'll never get away.
The complexity will add of the project will add to that discussion.
Right.
I'll stop there, and I think I'll go left to right for me. I'll start with Bill.
And I like that comment that, it's not a one size fits all for all facilities. I just wanted to take Judy's question and just turn it a little bit. I understand the district can pull up permits for classes of equipment and stuff, but outside of the agency, do we have that ability? I did not think we did, and it would be useful to have that. I mean, right now we basically go to likely facilities in our same classification, and we plow through permits to see anything of interest that's been issued lately. But I didn't think we had the ability to just like go in and try and search on paint booth applications or IC engine applications. And so I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah, I think it's mostly done through the PRR process right now. Public records. I don't know if there's any other mechanism. Actually, I got a question for staff. I think CPP has access. Do they still have access to internal?
Just to the facilities that we have requested and sent the letter, and it's only for a year or so. So it's very limited. It's mostly in state.
Okay, just to clarify for attendees is CPP with facilities authorization, a CPP can get access to emission data for the facility to better understand where they're at. And
So like we can see their NSR balance, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that makes sense, but I think it would mostly be through PR or give me.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I mean, but historically, that's how we've done it. I mean, we can go grab facilities and pull up permits individually.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you can use the find.
Right.
And you can do, the public information request process works very well.
And that's,
But we
I'll
try
record,
not
yeah.
to go that route. But.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's a process. It's something. I mean, I think when I was a staff member in BACT I used to do that crawl of what was the most recent issued.
And the other item, just briefly right now, because I know we're having quite a few, but as permits have evolved, the district has inserted more and more conditions in the permits that are just trying to capture nuances in the rule. And ostensibly over time, it's been, I've heard two reasons. One, to help the permittee understand their conditions and to help inspectors understand the conditions. And we've gotten away more from just referring to the rule. And this has caused us issues in the past. I mean, when we've actually been able to convince the district to make rule changes that are to our benefit off and on. But then we can't make use of them because they're also in our permits. Because the permit language is referring to the old rule and then the rule changes, and then we can't make use of that requirement. And usually we were able to make those changes then in our permit, but just adds to the permitting. And then in one case, we had to wait 2 or 3 years. I can't think of it now because EPA weighed in on our Title V permit and said we couldn't make the change until they SIP approved the rule. That was an 1146 issue. But yeah, it seems we keep going in that trend. And so I just didn't know if that's something we can, as we're looking at things, if that's something we can look at. I mean, talking to some of my permit engineers at some of our facilities, they were even looking at, I mean, instead of the district trying to do this within a permit, just having not like a permit advisory, but just having the list of conditions pulled out of a rule, more so for the end user and for district staff to make use of, rather than trying to, because I mean, and it's hard doing it in a rule because sometimes you're trying to take 2, 3, 4 paragraphs and trying to make a 1 or 2 line condition out of it. And so it's just something I wanted to throw on the table right now, and maybe something we can look at.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on a few points here and then I'll move on to David next, but definitely the complexity of the rule directly impacts time spent on the evaluation because we have to go through that, and then the permit conditions to implement those. And then in terms of users of a permit, I think facilities use it, right? Inspectors as well, as we think of them as they're going out to verify compliance. And then also the public looks at these as well in order, all permits are public facing. You touched on EPA. This is something that we directly identified as an issue back in the 2016 audit, and then recently reminded us of it, is they told us no high-level rule references. Minor source permits, we have, that's our system, a little more flexibility with rule references. EPA specifically in the 2016 audit identified you have to go down to that detail for those Title V permits, and then also equally in the statement of basis, the evaluation, call out all of those references, and that has taken a lot more time calling out that detail because it does go to EPA for review, and then obviously if we're outside that mechanism, we do have a little bit more discretion on our write-ups for that and timing. But that is some feedback we got from them, and it continues to persist. But I understand it is this box we're working in with rules. I think we've all, where possible, try to streamline rule requirements where we can in terms of how it impacts permitting, but some provisions are needed. And if you look at 1469, there's a lot in there to unpack in a permit. That's kind of what we work through in our process. But open to continuing. I know it's case by case with facilities, but where appropriate, and then maybe as we look at conditions too, different approaches to that. To kind of reduce some of that complexity or just refer to the rule. We struggle. I think we struggle with that in terms of just the time it takes to go through it as you look through some of these new rules. Let me stop and have David weigh into.
Kind of add to the thought process is we are getting more and more complex rules, and it kind of it makes the backlog worse. So for example, we specify equipment so specifically, or something that I always use, like, okay, I have a pump that doesn't emit, but it's part of the process, but it's specifically listed. So if I change that pump, now I should be changing my permit. Now I have a permit change that really doesn't do anything for emissions. So it's just an example of the more complex we get, the more permit revisions you're going to get, and it bogs the system down. So whenever possible, if we could find a way, if it's not really emitted relating, or we could simplify it, you'll reduce your burden of more changes coming in. So that's just one aspect of it. Another is going back to the discussion about, standardized conditions and looking at the most recent condition. Something that I see quite frequently is when we go in for a permit and you get a draft permit back and you get something, it's like, where did this condition come from? It's from another facility. But what happens quite frequently, especially when the permits take a long time to receive, the applicant is desperate for a permit and they'll take any conditions. And there isn't the discussion as far as is an appropriate permit condition. So I'd like to at least say it's a good idea to look at what's been in permits, but there should be maybe some vetting of what a standardized condition should be to at least acknowledge if someone took a condition and they wanted that condition, is it appropriate for others and not just to take it from another permit? That might help overall just to look at it in that perspective.
Yeah, no, thank you. As we go through that, there has been that discussion of like, we still need to go through. We're still, staff's going to play a role, and obviously we'll release these and have some discussion there of, that's great, it wasn't a permit, but is it, appropriate and reasonable to, help determine compliance. So thank you for that. I think another thing I wanted to mention too, I think some of the roles we deal with now have not been touched in several decades. And some of them did not ever envision some of the processes we're permitting now. And off the top of my head, 431.1, we have blending fuels, different combustion digester gas. So that's something, obviously role staff is impacted too, with, reclaim landing rules. But something we're looking forward to, and maybe that gets handled during, if we ever get to SOX landing rules. But updating some of our older rules to help facilitate our permitting process, because when you start blending is what category is it landed? So something, and then, feedback is always welcome on that if things are just outdated.
And we bring up rulemaking. Just another concept is, I understand the rulemaking has to be addressed in permitting. Is there a robust dialogue between rulemaking and permitting as far as whatever is in the rule you have to address, but is there enough dialogue during rulemaking to say, hey, this is going to be really hard to permit and really complex and will bog the system down. Maybe we should talk about it, because that may be a good focus here too.
Yes.
Okay.
Extensive. I'll leave it at that. We do have dedicated staff, from all affected teams in the internal process, and we do follow it closely and, bring up concerns on ease of permitting or what things mean, so we don't run into issues later. We really try and forecast what the impacts are going to be, what the universe is, what the requirements, how is this going to be implemented, what's the expectation of that language, or if you need to draw it out. I think we're probably doing that more so now than we ever have in the past. So yes, we do have those internal discussions. Thank you. Trying to think if there's anything else on the consulting.
I just had a small follow-up. The comment was made, we're limited to searching with the find directory to poke around for permit examples. And there is a webpage called Public Document Search on our site that ties in with a number of queries where you can tap into the public on base. And so one of those is permits to construct. And so you can, set the date range and pull those up, and it does allow a field for equipment description. So if you know what that term might be, paint spray booth or whatever, you might be able to land on a subset of permits of interest. So.
Yeah.
And that's a website, a web page for searching, or what, how do we find it?
It's
Other tools.
Other tools.
So when you go to find, it'll say other tools.
Okay.
So it's also where the Title V permit repository is, which is for Title V facilities. You can see all the permits once.
Right.
And
Right,
this,
I didn't know that.
it specifically says it has our permits from 2016 forward that you can search for. So.
Thank you, Brian. All right. Thank you. I think I was just going to mention, before we go to public comment, I was just going to mention the consultants were continuing to explore this as support for our system, because I think the thinking is we want staff focused on permitting efforts. So we're going to be looking at that again very shortly, continuing to utilize the two we have. They've been a very good resource for us. So we're looking to maintain that, and hopefully we'll see if we can expand it. All right. Let me pause there. We do have one hand raised, multiple hands raised now. So let's go to public comment. Chris Flagg, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for convening this meeting. It seems it's been very productive in finding different perspectives on how this austere organization can proceed most effectively in permitting, as well as other aspects related to the regulation of air emissions. As far as that goes, I have to wonder if at the next meeting that talks about permit conditions, perhaps staff could outline how they go about listing the permit conditions. While I have some ideas about it, I think that if I hint one direction or another, it might bias the outcome of staff just listing why they put certain conditions up front and why others trail down below. I'm sure there are rationale for this, and it might serve a good purpose to review that rationale in light of how permits and rules have changed over the past couple decades. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think we can absolutely touch on that. And I think you hit on the rationale and how these permits are designed as we go through it. There needs to be a limit. Why is that limit there? Is it daily? Is it monthly? Is it annual? What's the purpose of it? And then how does someone go about monitoring that, or keeping records for that, and what's appropriate? So thank you for that. We can touch on that on our permit condition or future permit condition discussions in our agenda. Next up in public comment is Rita Loof. Rita, go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. Well, first of all, I just wanted to recognize that I believe you've already implemented some of the recommendations that were made at the last meeting, specifically to member participation, because I see that you're giving task force members the opportunity to present the item. So I thank you for that, and I just wanted to recognize that. On the issue of standardized conditions, what I think would be helpful is if when the information is finalized with your consultant and you have a list of standardized conditions, that information be on your website rather than having to go through the public records request process, which can take several weeks for the district to provide the records. And the example that I can think of is that a long, long time ago, when Fred Lettuce was engineering manager, I remember that during the permit streamlining task force meeting, it was brought up by a member of the public that they didn't know how the policies, I believe it was the refineries that brought the issue up, that there was a lot of policies being cited at the permit engineer level, and that they had no idea where these policies were at. So back then, we found out that the engineering department had a whole host of policy memos that were not available to the public. And as a result of that interaction and that discussion, ultimately, those memos were made available on the website. So I think if we can do that with the permit conditions, it would be really helpful for the public, because I know a lot of the times the district has its own internal operating procedure, and that's not necessarily readily available to the public or to the applicants. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was what David Rothbard was talking about, which I think he explained it extremely well, about the permit modifications and the addition or the modification of a unit in a process line, and then having to be hit with modification fees. And you know, Jason, that we had a real example of that happening about a year or two ago, where we had a facility that came in and modified their coatings line, but the modification resulted in 0 emissions, and yet that facility had to pay over $7,300 for that 0 emission change. So it would be helpful if the district can come up with a policy whereby if there is no emission increase for a certain change, then that facility would be charged some kind of administrative fee. And I know there is some sort of a thing on administrative modifications and things like that. But it would be really helpful if we could solidify that and disclose that to the public on how we go about doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Let me go back to a few items there. Yes, well, first, thank you for the task force members for sharing these topics. I'm always willing to share the workload on presenting these items and coming up with them. But in all seriousness, thank you for coming up with these, because these are the items that need to be discussed. For first, you mentioned policies. I might, while we have this, might as well say where those are. On our website, under at the top bar under About and Policies and Legal Requirements, you can find our permitting policies and procedures. Something we're working on right now as part of the permitting enhancement program is we're working on our document management system. We're developing one so we can go through this process of, well, we're also doing backwards looking for all our gathered policies and, you know, taking them, seeing where they fall in this management system as we do it, so we can have clear library, searchable library of all these documents, and then as appropriate, and I think this will be a later agenda item, posting some of those or developing some that need to be posted because maybe they're counsel to staff and they need to be rewritten for public consumption. We're going through that right now as far as PEP. I don't think it's gotten a lot of attention because you hear document management system and yawn. For those that do permitting, I think that's actually probably the reaction I get for all of permitting is the yawn. But for those of us that are, you know, day in, day out are utilizing these policies and filling out permit applications, this is a big deal to put this all together. So yeah, David Ono's team is working on that as we go through it in PEP. Noted on the permit condition, I think we'll continue to talk about this and probably more on modifications and certain circumstances that require modifications that we need to be in permits. I think we had extensive discussion in the board on Rita's example. I won't touch on or revisit that. I think we hit on it in Rule 219, if I remember correctly. So, we can keep talking about that. And we'll keep the meeting moving. I think we have another hand raised. Allison Torres. Allison, go ahead when you're unmuted.
Thank you. Yeah, it took a second to get that unmute. So thank you for the discussion here, especially on the access that permit engineers have to the conditions and kind of mirroring, that access to the permittee. I think it would really help from the permittee's perspective to understand how the standard conditions are developed. I know you mentioned that you're starting to use more consultants for some of those things, but are the standard conditions consistent team by team? Is it developed kind of cross teams? Is it more developed at the supervisor level? Some of that as far as how the process is currently working, I think would be helpful. And then as those standard conditions are developed and used, kind of to echo what Rita mentioned, having some type of public access to that or published access of those templates by the permittees so that rather than us having to go try to dig through find, we have a better understanding of those standard condition changes that have been made and are not surprised. So just kind of the overall concept of transparency for the permittee so that we can kind of be in the loop on as these changes occur.
Thank you for that. And I think the team by team aspect does come up simply because the teams are organized by industry. So we've been trying to, address those silos where it's equipment that does cross teams, engines, boilers, things like that. And again, in terms of, developing all of this, we're just starting out on it. We have hundreds of equipment categories we deal with, so we'll try and hit the high level ones by industry. And I think where it's really, we're seeing our bottlenecks is probably the approach we'll take. But I think we'll keep discussing this and using this forum to present those efforts, making them available, and then maybe using those permitting working groups to really develop the discussion in detail on what may be needed. So thank you, Allison. And then we have one more hand raised, Alok. Luck. Alok. Oh, thank you for that. Alok.
Sorry, good morning again. One other question I have is from your past permitting engineers who are all retired now, they told me that in writing any conditions and stuff like that, they have to deal with the old database and they always struggle with finding right word, right sentences and stuff like that. It seems like, it is not customized. So you have to basically choose from a list of words or sentences and stuff like that. And it makes them really hard for them to means if they have to write certain condition in a certain way. I don't know if it's still the case or not.
It's a lot. Thank you. It's a lot better than it used to be. We have our database. It's searchable to an extent. I think we're still working through some hurdles because it can be improved. What we like to do is have this is supposed to be initiated through permitting enhancement programs to better our resources, our software. It's going to take time. We do have some systems in place where you can look at the equipment categories and pull from our database. So it's there and it's a lot easier to search than you mentioned old and retired engineers, what it was 20, 30 years ago. We're rarely looking at microfiche anymore, but it used to be that. So we do have a database. I don't see any other hands raised. So if there's any other, I'm sorry, Carol, we do have one in the room. Carol, if you can identify yourself and.
So Carol Kaufman, Metropolitan Water District, and I'm really encouraged by all this discussion. As a permittee, right, it's really great to be able to improve this process. And so I think in terms of just a lot of the standardization that's been talked about, it'll be very helpful because, you know, it'll help manage our expectations as permittee, right, when we go into the permitting process. And I think what we've tried to do in the past, even before we submit a permit application, we're trying to look to see what our permit might hold, right? And in the design of the equipment too, you know, we might try to like build in certain things because we know that you're going to be asking us, you know, in addition to what the rules require. And so that's going to be helpful. And I think it is case by case, but there are some general areas that I think we touched upon those that could be like talked about, like certain documents that need to be submitted at certain time. Is it going to be a permit to construct / permit to operate, or is it still just a permit to construct? And I know you referred to the XPP process before. It's something that we'll be able to do there. And I think that also talked about the Rule 219 a little bit. And for like non-Title V facilities, is it something that we have to list those materials, or is it something that, you know, they can be not included so we don't have to go for a permit modification later? So all those things. And then the other area is the data that you've been talking about, right? And so that is something that we really do try to delve into. And I think all the processes that people talk about here, we've done, right? We try to do public records requests. We like to see what other facilities have similar equipment. So whatever way we could help facilitate that and improve that process. And we have comments, and so it's going to be exciting, I think, to see that going forward. So anyway, just wanted to offer the support because I think a lot of the comments here are right on. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will give you credit. You did, or your concerns did initiate some of what our consultants working on now with, you know, the data we've provided them to help, you know, bring together a unified approach for some efforts. Something I did want to bring up before we move on, and we'll probably talk about timing and agenda items that are remaining. But I did speak with EPA staff about this form. I'm going to touch base with them later, but they are open to the concept of this discussion for Title V permitting. I still got to have some more back and forth with them, but you know, maybe we'll talk about that in the future as a potential agenda item.
Would they join us at the table?
Probably virtually. They're not local, but you know, that those conversations are happening because obviously you see the split of their permitting system that we're implementing in the minor source permitting. So just let you reminded me. So I think maybe hopefully in the future they'll be continue to be receptive to that idea. We have 2 items left. I think we do want to get to the CPP program discussion. I think we may want to talk about 6, maybe deferring just for time purposes, or agenda item 6, improving permit application submittal. If that's something.
Talk about them both together.
That's what I'm thinking is maybe we can just wrap that in and then as an agenda item. I don't know legally do I need to have a motion to do that or to change the defer an agenda item or wrap it into one?
I think you can move around the agenda as long as you cover the topics. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So we'll talk about 5 and 6 together. I think this is, you know, I think I'll just jump into it. I think David was listed. I'm sure he'll have concepts on this, but we'll go ahead and introduce it. But this is certified permitting professional program is something that was developed a long time ago, but I think the purpose of it was to certify individuals preparing permit applications. I believe this was introduced under state law, health and safety code, in order to assist with the permitting process to make it go more smoothly. Staff would then do less work in the evaluation as it's already been drafted out. And then permits go out faster because there's less work. As part of PEP enhancing everything, you know, looking back, we've seen mixed results. Some not so good from CPP program, or maybe it's just it has turned into here's the data, staff go ahead and do it. As far as the evaluations. But it's a topic I think David wanted to present, we wanted to present, is revisiting the program. How can we make it better in order to support staff's efforts, to lessen staff's efforts in, to approve a permit? And then just in terms, so everyone's aware of requirements, we have a few CPPs joining with us today, but it is to become a CPP, and please fill in if I miss anything. It is an exam where you have to prepare a permit application package. It's an in-person test. It's not simple. The pass rate is not high, so it is a complex process. But then from there, it is a one-time testing, and then I believe an annual renewal, just monetary renewal to keep to maintain CPP status. And then all of our CPPs are listed on our website for if a facility wants to have a application prepared. And I think that's the CPP program in a nutshell. And I don't know if staff had anything to add to that description before I offer it to the task force.
Maybe only that they're not all listed on the website. Some
Correct.
choose not to be listed.
That's it. Okay, that brings up another point, is some CPPs have a business, maybe consulting business, that prepare permit applications for other entities. Others work at facilities and prepare permit applications for their employer. So that would be the difference. So not all CPPs are consultants necessarily. Thank you for that. But I think I wanted to open it up for task force member discussion, is as we address this under PEP, is what are opportunities, ideas, thoughts the task force may have. Staff has some, but I think we really want some feedback on what's working, what is not working, and ultimately, and I'll wrap in item number 6, it is all with the interest of improving permit application submittals and getting this permit process moving faster, even faster, more reliable. And I know we have the concept of handbook and all the materials that CPPs need, so that I am aware of that, David.
And just to tee this up, because Judy's the best person to respond to this, but the discussion you and I had is I was bringing up to Wayne as far as how do we speed up the process. And part of the discussion was the EPA requires a statement of basis. That's what you need for the permitting process. And the statement of basis has become more complex. And I think my response is, okay, if I hire someone to prepare the statement of basis for you, will that speed things up? And he said, that's the purpose of the CPP, but it's outdated and needs to be updated to provide that functionality. So that's the backdrop here of if the CPP program could get to the point where you want it, hypothetically, that would speed up the permitting process. So, Judy.
And Judy, maybe if you can explain your experience and role with the CPP program, where our attendees understand why we're looking at you.
So I taught at UCI for 25 years. The CPP preparation, well, it's not official, right? But it was a preparation course, 10 weeks, right?
I took the course.
You took the course. Yeah. And Janice took the course, right? So I did my best to try, and I have continued teaching through UCI sunsetted their whole environmental certificate program. Unfortunately, in my opinion, but in any case, I've continued teaching. I teach online. It's publicly it's offered to people. But in any case, and obviously every year I have a CPP study group of the young folks that are in our organization. We never ask them to take the test, but they're all eager to learn and eager to do it because they want to learn and understand how to permit. And the best way to learn how is to study and sit for that exam because, and I tell people, don't expect to pass because it's hard. But you'll learn through that process. You'll learn through taking the exam. You'll learn through that experience and then practicing. And there's a lot to permitting. Some of and I'm sure you see better CPPs submit applications and then some garbage that comes in probably too. One of the things that has happened is, and the idea was that a CPP application could go in. There was an idea, I suppose everyone has abandoned. We used to put our stickers on the application to say, yes, I'm putting my stamp, like a PE stamp, on that application. And there was even a process of, if we don't get a good one, you will get a black mark. And if you get more than 3 black marks, you are decertified. I don't know that anybody ever got that, right? That's kind of hard to implement, probably. But the reality is we submit applications and we do a lot. I know from our organization, we submit a lot of applications. We do our best to document and do exactly the engineering evaluation that the Air District is required to do. So we try to make it as easy as possible. Yesterday didn't give him much time. I asked one of my permit folks, hey, give me some talking points. And he came up with a lot of talking points, but there's a lot of frustration. We submit applications, permit engineers don't even read it. They'll wait 6 months and then come to us and ask a question that's right there in the document that we gave to them in the first place. So, it's very frustrating for people who put a lot of effort into something to be disregarded, I guess. The district has made clear, hey, we can't take somebody's application and just put it on the top of the pile and do that one to the exclusion of others. That's not fair. Agreed. That's not fair. But if a knowledgeable person submits the 9 yards to you and you immediately, district engineer immediately rejects the permit application, doesn't speak to the person, doesn't give communication, and assume that the person knows what they're doing. If you take the assumption, oh, this is another dumb application, they don't know what they're doing, out the door it goes. And then it takes 2 months to resolve. The district thought it was the wrong fee, but in fact, it was the right fee. It should have been accepted. It should have been a short conversation to address a fee confusion issue. That's where a CPP application, you have to sort of reward the person for giving full information, for giving the accurate stuff, by just at least showing the respect to communicate with them. In another example, we submitted an application. This was for a minor source, a food oven, less than 10 million BTUs per hour. They were replacing burners replacing with better low NOx burners, adding an RTO, and it got delayed for about more than 3 months because the permit engineer decided that PSD CO credits were required. Well, obviously not. Okay, but we couldn't convince the permit engineer of this. We should have elevated it more quickly. Our bad. But nevertheless, they didn't have a regard at all for the person who submitted that application. So if we could just have a better communication channel, even for someone who has gone through this certification process, and certainly if somebody's not submitting quality applications, okay, you're at the bottom of the pile, we're going to give you a query, but at the same time, if there were a recognition that, hey, I'm working with a knowledgeable person, not just Joe Blow. And, in a lot of cases, right, we know these requirements, very well. At least we could have that conversation, but when there's not that good communication and an assumption that this is, you know, it's wrong, it's not helpful. So if we had a better, if it were received from the district as, okay, we can get this process quickly, you would get better applications. Because people would go, I mean, as I teach in my class, you don't have to be a CPP to submit an application. You submit a good application and then the permit engineer can actually process it quickly. So that's what we, you know, really that's what we want to get to. You don't need to be a CPP to do that. And we want quality applications, but then we've got to have the permit engineers who, you know, communicate and respect what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
No, I do follow, you know, I think we will work on improving it. We are, I don't know when this happened, but you know, we are going through some growing pains with staffing, and we'll improve that. And then I don't know if it's, I'm thinking of ideas here. I don't know if we need a separate forum to talk with CPPs.
Maybe a separate forum is
Yeah.
a good idea
Where we
for
just
that. Yeah.
Call them in and this working group concept.
Yeah. There's some very good aspects to
Mhm.
that. And because it is a way to educate a broader community. There are lots of people who take my classes that are not going to take the exam because they're afraid of the exam, but they've brought their knowledge level up to understanding that back does not determine till the end of the application evaluation. That, you know, how does back get determined? All those kinds of things. You know, that's important to keep that public communication going and understanding going for people who are impacted by the requirements to permit. So that's probably a part of the program you don't realize, but it is really important that.
No, thank you for that. And I think, yeah, I think it's part of it's rethinking. And it's come of the CPP program. We have attendees here. I'm not going to identify them, but we have been working with them with that CPP money because they have a very large project coming with multiple sites, but the same equipment or range of equipment. And we're like, let's hammer this out beforehand, before the application submittals come in, and get your evaluation done so these can be fast tracked.
Right. Again, it's that communication piece. And maybe that's where it's the recognition that, hey, we're working with a peer here. Let's leverage off of that, get them to do all that they can to quantify the emissions, to quantify the risk, to, you know, give us the whole evaluation accurately, so then we can easily get it done. That is the idea behind it, but it's got to be paired with a recognition from the district that, okay, I'm working with a peer and I'm going to listen to what they say. And if I'm not, they're telling me something and I don't believe it, I'm going to go to my manager right away.
Yeah, I don't think that's anything we've ever done in the past as both CPPs in to discuss. I mean, but I'm open to it.
Right. So
definitely, I think it would be very useful as we look to do this, because I don't know if we need regular testing because we do have new rules. I don't know if they're staying up on those. I mean, it's up for discussion.
That's where you kind of need to discern the better and the not so better.
Yes. And act on it again.
And act on it and go, okay, is this a peer that I'm collaborating with, or do they not really understand?
Because I think the next steps, and I'm going to jump to Bill, but we can talk about it after, is once we get or, you know, improve the bad ones, recognize the good ones, is how do we incentivize?
How do you incent? Exactly.
So,
and incentivize to be one of those good ones.
yes, yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right.
To that. So let's go to Bill and then we'll go to David after that.
So I'm not a CPP, but I dabble in permits. But one issue I've noticed is that, and it's because they're new, but like the senior engineers, they've been to our facilities numerous times. They've seen the type of equipment they're permitting. They've been there to review operations once they've been permitted or a permit to construct's been issued. But in talking with some of our recent permitting activities, and I know a lot of them are really new permit engineers, but they're really have no familiarity with the type of equipment or operations we have at all. And so I don't know if there's a way to improve that, or I know even we're short-staffed, South Coast is still short-staffed, but I mean, just a way to get them out and be able to actually see some of what they're doing when they're permitting and seeing why a particular condition might not make sense. Just looking at it on paper, they think it's the easiest thing in the world. But in practice, it just doesn't, it won't make sense. And so I just don't know a way to improve that.
It's something we've been working on. It's under PEP, is enhanced training. I think I've been encouraging of staff getting out there to see technologies. This is a daily effort for training right now. It's something all industries are experiencing, and we're handling it. Something we've trying to do is, be working with industries to have that big group effort. Even in a group setting, it's still hard to dive into the details. I don't know if OC Sands with us, but they hosted us 2 weeks ago. The waste management team, very helpful. I joined them on that one. We're in conversations with OCWR, Chevron, and Marathon to do something similar. El Segundo's a little far out, or Long Beach, but we're open to these concepts of just getting stuff out there. Huntington Beach.
Yeah. So, but no, it's just something just wanted to mention. And I know on the rulemaking side, there's been quite an effort over the last few years that, they come out and they look at the facilities as they're working on rules. And so, but just think that would be a great benefit especially to the new engineers.
Yeah, I think maybe just some more encouragement to get out in the field. I think part of it is getting familiar with the equipment. Obviously it's the pull of doing desk work and doing that, but I've always been of the opinion that saves a lot of back and forth of just going out and looking at it in some cases. So appreciate that. David.
Just wanted to say the big picture here is, can we find a mechanism to get permits, the applications the way you want it, and get permits rolled out quickly? If we get the CPP program to a point where you're comfortable, if that's possible to get the permitting time cut in half or even faster, there's going to be a market. I'm going to say, I need a permit done for my wastewater treatment plant done by this absolute time. I will pay more money to hire someone like Judy to go put this together to get it done quickly. So if there's a way that you'll advertise, people will know, if I do this, I will get my permit quickly. That will solve a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get better applications, your staff won't have to work as hard, and we'll get permits more quickly. So this might be something worth our time to invest in.
No, I definitely think the potential is here. I think we all think that. It's just, again, it's that incentivization. We each have the different CPPs we deal with, but it is getting that recognition of, oh wow, this system really does work, and I can get. And I don't know if it's specialties for CPPs on certain equipment. I don't know if it's monetary or just time, flat out time, but it's
It has to have meaning.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're open to these ideas. We don't know the quick fix, but we're open to ideas.
Well, maybe this is if it's EPA dictating this, maybe that's a good focus group of, but we want to get here. How do we do it?
I guess at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned 3 key items. And I guess from the district's perspective, do you see that you're getting value out? Because at time, so I've been involved with this a long time. And so, at times there's even been discussion about tabling the program completely. It's gone back and forth, waffled back and forth. And so I just, from your viewpoint, is the district seeing, or are we just not at that point at the moment?
We don't. I think if you had to categorize it as a whole, Judy's mentioned, we see it, good and bad. It's not as effective as it was originally intended to right now. And it does. And, is that regular testing? You come back every few years and re-up it, and therefore, you keep up on the rules, the expectations. Is it more, I'm sure, and we have this here, more communication, obviously.
Would say, have your district staff take
Yes.
the CPPs in?
Yeah, sometimes.
But then like,
The answer.
and following on David's comment, like for Title V, actually, as far as I know, or at least all the regions in the US that we have Title V permits, you're the only agency that writes statement of basis. Everywhere else in the US, we write our own statement of basis and submit for approval. It's just part of the package. And so if there are things like that, it's just, if there's something to reduce your
Yes.
workload, but that's not something, it was a new concept to us when you started doing it back at the beginning of the program, and because it's not something we see anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. No, it's, we appreciate the write-ups, but it's just, it needs to be thorough and hit on all the points. So, I think we can keep this on the table. Again, it's a PEP item, so it's going to continue to be discussed from the board here. Maybe we have a separate forum. Obviously, those that are paying attention and want to contribute and make the program better and benefit from it, facilities are going to step up for that discussion. But
right, either it should be made worthwhile or it should just be ended. There's no point, right? Otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's actually in health and safety codes. I don't think we can quite
I didn't realize.
end it. So,
but the idea was streamlining in any
exactly.
case. That is what it was for. So
yes. And so I think
let's sort out how we can make it better.
Yeah, and even if it's that making it a requirement
Sure.
to that certain facilities have to do it, or have somebody prepare it like that. I think everything's on the table right now. Okay, I do see we're going to go to public comment. I see hand raised.
I think that was
That's actually stuck. Do we have any public comments in the room?
I was just going to say for the CDP, I think, I don't know as much about the programs because we do a lot of our permits in-house and none of us do have the CDP. But if there is a way that it could be recognized, I guess, by some staff and expedited somehow, XPP, CPP, right? And then also, I don't know, the continuing education credits, is that something that's part of the CPP? Which then could assure us, as we're looking at people, that they are kind of staying on top, right, of requirements and so.
just last year.
Yeah, and I think that was part of it is so many rules each and every year are they staying up on it? And what's the proper way to make sure they are?
It's not easy. We do it organizationally and it's great because we have lots of different people, but yeah, if it's one person, I don't know. I don't know
have
how
their areas of expertise. CVP in particular discipline.
That was something we were talking about internally. We're having just a robust discussion internally.
Height.
Yes, like an engine or, someone who specializes in engines. For the record, that was Carol Kaufman making public comments. So let me pause out. We'll go virtual for public comments. I see Rita Loof. Rita, go ahead.
Thank you. And hi, Karen. So I got my CPP license 30 years ago. At the time, I started when I was 5, by the way. But at the time, I had 4 years experience as an air quality permit engineer working for the district. And I remember taking the test. I was hoping I would pass, which I'm glad I did, but I was not 100% sure that I would pass because I knew that each district engineer did things differently. And just because there was a CPP handbook didn't mean that the district engineer was actually going to follow that. So while the test was in line with the CPP handbook, and I went through those classes, when you're actually applying for a permit, it does not mean that the permit engineer is going to be on the same page as the CPP handbook. So the issue that Judy raised about communication is absolutely true. You basically have to get inside the head of whichever engineer you're in front of, which is the way it's been done. So I think to the extent that we can help CPPs understand how the permit engineers are applying these policies and how they're interpreting them. And to the extent that we can tell the permit engineers that they need to standardize a little bit and go by the CPP handbook, I think that's going to be very useful to get a CPP complete application in front of you, because I think that's the difference between a bad CPP and a good CPP. The good CPP figured out what the district engineers are looking for and is giving it to them. So I'm going to give you a concrete example of something you can do today that you can use as a tester. Okay, and it involves the Title V program and Rule 317. During the last meeting, the public workshop on Rule 317.1, we had a company that made public comments and said that they're not really a Title V company. They don't meet the threshold. They're way under, but they have a Title V permit, and it's because the permit engineers convinced them that it would be better to get a Title V permit. So now we're dealing with this issue of Title V companies that don't really meet the definition of a Title V facility. How is that facility going to get out of the Title V program? And those are comments that were raised at the public workshop. But for this group, I think it would behoove the district to put together a procedure of these are the steps that facilities that are not really Title V, but are in the Title V for whatever the reason, and want to get out of Title V, this is how they petition the district to get out of Title V. Because I can tell you that as a result of Rule 317.1, those discussions and those questions are coming to us at the trade association level. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita. This is going to wrap up everything great in terms of, we were talking about permitting, being involved in permit or rulemaking. But so I did talk to the gentleman after that, and we had some back and forth. That permit renewal actually, there was 2 comments. That permit renewal actually was issued. It wasn't 4 years old. It got issued 2 years ago. But it was that talk of the business decision with them to get in and out of Title V, because their potential to emit was so huge, but their actual emissions are really small. And then we have our process. We have a Title V exemption form that facilities can fill out. But I agree, we probably need to broadcast as this is going on, but we reached out to our rules because I won't hopefully get into the technical detail, but there's different ways to go about it as far as taking enforceable permit conditions to get out of Title V and what you give up. So we reached out to rule staff and said, we need to be very clear on what the EPA's expectations are for 317.1, because we're going to be communicating this to facilities who are going to be making business decisions, potentially giving up emissions to get out of Title V, and we don't want this to come full circle, or you told us something else.
Yeah, it needs to be written down.
Yes.
We've done it many, many times over the years, but
Yeah.
now you have a lot of newer engineers and they're unfamiliar and they think it one way, but yeah, it needs to get written down.
So that's in process. We're meeting with rule staff. We're going to be meeting with EPA specifically to talk about this, but this is on our radar. You know, again, there's businesses out there, obviously, that are making decisions because there's these needs coming, and it may not be for potential to emit, you know, allowances that they're using, and they need to decide if keep that for their facility for growth or off ramp and say, no, thank you.
Right.
We're done with that. So we are aware of it. Thank you very much, Rita, for bringing that up. That is something that's currently happening, and communication will keep up because I think it's going to come up in probably the next working group meeting. But we've been dealing with Kalam and Michael Kraus on that. They are involved in that. All right. Do you see other hands raised now? We got one more. Mark Abramowitz, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mark Abramowitz with Community Environmental Services. Thank you. Listening to some great conversation and great discussion here. And one thing which has really hit me throughout the day, and particularly after Rita's comments, you're making a number of changes in policies, and there are different rule changes. And look at the new incentives and the different pricing that the district is going to be having for UVEB, for example. In all those kinds of situations, you may have companies, particularly the smaller ones, that may decide to make business decisions to get out of Title V or to make other changes, in their permits that might affect potential to emit in order to get various incentives or put in new technologies. It might be real useful for the district to get its public affairs department to send out a quarterly or semi-annually newsletter to permit holders, which specifically describe some of those changes in policies that are occurring, and maybe even give some examples of how they might go about getting out of Title V, how they might be able to evaluate when they want to change their permits to take advantage of new incentives, those kinds of things. I think it would just be a win-win for everybody if the district did that.
Thank you very much for the recommendation, Mark. I think that was going to get into one of the other business things or things I was going to list as we concluded, but I'll do it now. But that was kind of some of the thinking I think we brought up in last Streamlining Task Force is the communication mechanisms we're building up right now. We started the general permitting sign-up list. We announced this meeting through that. We're still working out some kinks through that, and we'll continue to do that for, I think, utilizing that for a lot of things, permitting advisories, public meetings. So we really want to encourage public to sign up for that to get information to it. It's on our sign-up list on our webpage. So
What's it called exactly?
we call it general permitting. Sorry, my tongue is getting dry at the end of this meeting. And that's what we're utilizing. We also started one for gas stations, but that's going to be specific because just volume of gas station permit applications we've been getting. So we're going to be using that as the mechanism. In addition, Mark, we'll take that back for our public affairs team and utilize their resources a little bit to get this out. But all of this is being done because I think we sat back and we had information we needed to get out, and there was nothing there other than other lists for other purposes. So we're trying to make our own forms. And again, that's kind of the thinking of permitting working groups is we have a regular form mechanism to communicate with industry and the public on permitting items. So thank you. I think we'll take all of this back. I don't see any other hands raised. That does, I think all we have is left on the agenda is other business. I think I did mention that sign up list. We do have our PEP written monthly report in the stationary source this month. We're working on that right now. And then since we're talking CPPs, we do have an exam coming up in June. What I think 20. May 28th? June 28th. June 28th is another exam date. Just putting on everyone's calendar. And we'll be sending out information on that on our website. I'll stop there. Did any other task force members have other business to bring up?
Just the concept of how, there's all the things we talked about today, and it requires a lot of work. So maybe for the next meeting, if there's anything we could do sooner than later, that might be something to put on the list. And I don't know if, Terrence Mann would be open to it, but if there's something where, example, you're putting something in that reduces emissions, if there's a way to fast track it or enforcement discretion, I don't know how much wiggle room we have, but just anything that we could think of that could speed up the process for some applications might be a nice thing to add to the next meeting. And I don't know when you want to do the next meeting. Maybe it's something else to say.
Yeah, I think in scheduling wise, I think we're going to try and launch this permitting working group June, and then right after that go into streamlining again, July-ish, probably after the holiday. We'll keep that in mind as we develop the agenda, be in touch with the task force members with agenda items, continue to do that. That is, on the recommended list. And part of it too is again, building up what parties do we need here for the discussion, scheduling with them, all the logistics that go along with it. That's kind of where, we need about a month to kind of lay out which agenda items go when, but I'll keep that of actions that can be taken sooner rather than later to have that discussion up front.
Last thought from me is thank you very much. I hope this discussion is helpful for you and staff. To go back, this is kind of the way we used to do things for permit streamlining. It's been a long time, but I think having folks bring constructive feedback to you for your consideration is helpful for us, and hopefully it's helpful for you.
No, really appreciate the robust discussion and getting back to it. Again, we'll figure out, and then the other thing as far as future meetings is, mixing in some of that transparency and numbers with this discussion. We always try and keep it concise on agenda, but it's discussion that needs to be had, and then we'll have another mechanism with this working group. So I think we're going to have a lot of meetings in front of us in the next year, so we're scheduling that out. So, all right, I'll pause on. Yes, we do have public comment on the other business. Bill Quinn, please go ahead, and then we'll. Or task force member comments. I'm sorry. You're still a task force member.
Thank you, Jason. Bill Quinn at SEEB. And I just wanted to really thank you and also David for kind of spearheading this effort to bring this task force back to where we have some really tremendous communication here. I mean, I think what I've heard today is that you've taken advantage of a lot of experts around the room and their actual input into the permitting process. And so even if we might not have solved the world in today's meeting, I think there's a lot of great ideas and look forward to this group continuing. So thank you very much. And thank you, David, for spearheading this effort.
Yeah. I do want to thank everybody. I think this was very helpful, especially on the communication piece too. I think it's very helpful and put solving the world on the next agenda. I do want to go to public comment on other business. I see Kurt Coleman raised his hands. I don't know if it was a late hand for the late agenda item or the last agenda item or this one, but Kurt, go ahead.
No, it was for this one, and I just want to say Bill Quinn took the words out of my mouth, so I'll let you guys get off to lunch. But again, thank you, and I think it was a really productive meeting, and it looks like we're heading in the right direction, the direction we've been hoping for. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kurt. And then one last time, wanted to open it up for any general public comment from any of our attendees. Seeing none, we will come to a close. Permit Streamlining Task Force, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion. All right.
Thank you.